Hi everyone, I'm Hisham again. As many of you know from my previous video, I recently passed the SCA exam on my first attempt. In that video, I shared some reflections on how I approached the exam. One of the most common questions I get is about my whiteboard, how I use it to stay structured both in practice and in the exam. So today, I'll take you through it step by step. This simple layout kept me organized, reminded me of the key domains during history, and guided me through management as well. Before we dive into the structure itself, let's talk about the positioning. The placement of the whiteboard really matters. I used to place it just under the screen instead of the keyboard. That way, I only need to move my eyes rather than turning my head to the right or the left. This helps me to maintain eye contact, avoid looking distracted in front of the patient and examiner, and come across as confident while still keeping rapport. Let's start with the right side because this is the backbone of my consultations. At the very top, I have written identity, open question, history of presenting complaint. For example, am I speaking to Andrew Collins? Could you confirm your date of birth, please? Then I open with something like, what would you like to discuss today? And move into the history of the presenting complaint. Asking about impact is flexible depending on the case. If the complaint is significant, I may ask about the impact before the history of presenting complaint. If ICE feels more important for setting the agenda, I may explore impact afterwards. To do this, I might ask, how is this affecting you? And at that point, I may explore home life, work, and mental health if relevant. Doing ICE early is really important. As you know, ICE stands for ideas, concerns, and expectations. I try to avoid using those three words directly, and instead I use natural words like thoughts, worries, and hopes. While listening carefully and reflecting on their ICE, I'm already planning the next set of questions to help me narrow down the diagnosis. That means targeted questions for differential diagnosis, excluding red flags, and sometimes systemic review questions if appropriate, and I will explain this in a bit. Then we go to the background questions. You usually get this information in the 3 minutes before the case, so I don't re-ask everything. I simply confirm. For example, I understand you have hypertension and you are on amlodipine. Is that right? Any other medical conditions? Any other medications? If relevant, I may check compliance or ask about over-the-counter medications or herbal remedies. I also ask about allergy and family history if relevant. I ask about travel history only if clinically relevant. Otherwise, it can sound rigid like a medical school history taking exercise. Now, social history, which is quite important, which may include smoking, alcohol, drugs, diet, and exercise. If I haven't already asked about home, work, or mental health, I may cover that here. Before verbalizing my diagnosis, I usually ask an open question like, is there anything else that you would like to add? Then I share the diagnosis. I often follow this with, have you ever heard about this condition before? Which gives me a chance to explain it in simple terms and check their understanding. I write the word verbalize on my whiteboard because sometimes I go straight into explaining the condition without actually naming it. This little reminder helps me make sure I clearly state the diagnosis when appropriate. Of course, you will not always have a single clear diagnosis. In those situations, it is absolutely fine to verbalize your list of differentials instead. Let's move to the management. I reflect on ICE. If they worried about cancer, I explain how the plan addressed that. If they expected a medication, I explain if that's appropriate or not. I outline management options, check their understanding, and involve them in the decision. I remind myself not to medicalize everything. I consider advice, leaflets, support groups, and practical issues like driving. I arrange follow-up where needed, and finally, I always safety net, explain what to look out for and what to do if things change. On the left side of the board, I have listed systemic review questions. I don't ask all of these questions in every case, but they are useful in situations like uncertainty or suspected cancer of unknown origin. If I ever hit a mental block, those questions act as a guide and help me decide the best next step to explore. Example for my systemic review: how is your appetite? Any weight loss? Any new lumps or bumps? Any fever or night sweats? Do you feel more tired than usual? Any pain anywhere? Bowels and water works working okay? Any skin changes? Any breathing problems? Any numbness or weakness? And here, I may add headache and vomiting if I'm considering a space occupying lesion. At the very bottom, I have added a personal reminder for myself, smile, because building rapport is just as important as clinical reasoning. Finally, the bottom part of the board is flexible for each case. On the left bottom, I write down important notes during the 3 minutes and also during the consultation. I'll share a few examples to explain things I may write in the 3 minutes before the case. If the patient is a 30-year-old female, I may write pregnancy, periods. For an elderly patient, I may write support at home. If blood showing deranged liver functions, I remind myself to ask about transfusion, tattoo, sexual history, drugs, travel history, leg swelling, abdominal pain, jaundice, urine and stool color changes. For blood showing hypercalcemia, I can write hints to myself like hypercalcemia symptoms, parathyroid, myeloma, cancer. For diabetes, I remind myself I may need to cover symptoms, complications, hypos, driving, annual reviews. I may also write timelines or key phrases the patient says that I will need to come back to it. On the right bottom, I outline the points I want to cover in the management plan. While taking history, I may write things like smoking advice, patient's concern, a medication, a referral, specific investigation, specific lifestyle advice, driving, safeguarding, follow-up, safety netting. These become my checklist when I move into the management. This way, the top half stays consistent every time, and the bottom half adapts to each patient. So that's my whiteboard system for the SCA. Right side for the consultation structure, left side for the systemic review, and bottom half for notes and management. If you are preparing for the exam, the more you practice with a system like this, the more natural it will feel in the real thing. To help with that, I'm sharing a WhatsApp group for the SCA preparation. There you can join free sessions and also find study partners to practice with. I'll leave the link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I wish you all the very best of luck for your preparation.